Adam, dude,
What's
first and
up?
foremost, I'm kind of bummed that we're at episode 25 and you haven't been on yet. And that's me. That's not on you, dude. I've
I've been
been,
waiting.
I know you have. I know you have. I was telling Katie today, I was like, I am literally fired up for this one today. It's like, it's great talking to new guys and stuff, but when you get one of your boys on, it's a whole different thing. So I'm ready for this one today, brother.
Thanks a lot for having me on, man.
Absolutely, dude. So for the other people that don't know you as well as I do, give a little backstory, man. Like, what do you do for a living? What things do you love? Like hobbies, things like that. Like, what
Yeah,
makes
well, it's all based around one thing, right? That's family. So I've got an amazing wife. Her name is Cody. We've been married now for going on 3 years. And we'll do the math here in a little bit, all right? But I've got 4 kids. We've got 4 kids total, right? So we've got a 12-year-old, we've got a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and our little wild man's going to turn 2 next week. So that in and of itself is kind of like the center of my world, right? What supports that though is my work. And so I work for a company called Altria. Some of your guests may have heard of them, and we've been in the news a little bit recently. But really, we're a consumer packaged goods company, primarily dealing with things like tobacco, right? We also have a wine company as well. And what I'll say about that, I'm sure when some of your guests hear about tobacco, I'm going to be kind of labeled, maybe put in a box a little bit. And sometimes it's kind of hard to talk to my family about it, right? What I'll say is I'm proud of what I do, and I'm proud because the company is all about responsibility. And I know that probably will surprise some people, but we do a lot of work with our retailers and make sure that they're selling the goods that we provide responsibly. We certainly don't want anyone coming into the category or in the space that don't use the product. If you use it, use one of our brands. If you don't, then stay away. For hobbies though, I've always loved to travel. Thomas, you and I went to South Africa, had a great time there. Traveling the world. It's a little bit harder now with such a large family. I mean, flying is not cheap when there's 6 of you. So we try to stay in the States. And with the little wild man, we really drive a lot of different places now. So we'll hit like Texas. I'm based in Arizona, so we'll do Texas and California. She's got family in Colorado, so we spend a lot of time there. The other thing I love doing is starting businesses. And, entrepreneurialism has kind of been the methodology has been what I was brought up in. Always sitting around the dinner table talking about new business ideas, new products. What's a pain point? All right, what would be a cool solution? Talking with my old man about that stuff. And it's kind of lived in me, it's part of who I am, part of my DNA now. So I always have fun. If I'm in a rut or, kind of bored, I'll just start thinking about, what can we do next? How can we make lives a little bit easier out there?
dude, first and foremost, I love that. I know that about you. Like there's a story. I'm gonna share a little story real quick, dude.
All
Because
right.
when we were down in
Uh-oh.
South Africa, we went into, was it Deloitte? It was Deloitte, wasn't it?
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, and they were like asking questions. Man, Adam was crushing it. I was like looking around, like, who's gonna offer this guy a position at this company? Come on now. Adam's like, so tell me about this and this and this. I'm like, I don't even know what the hell he's talking about right now, but get him, son. So I can vouch to that, dude. You're always on that mind frame. With that, I'd love to learn a little more about that. Was that something with your dad? Because your dad's an awesome dude. I mean, I just know a little bit about him, but was he just constantly in that mind frame as well? Is that what distilled that in you then?
Yeah, he was. So my parents had their own restaurant. And so they're all from New Jersey. I'm the only one in my family from Arizona, like born in Arizona. And they came out to start a restaurant. And then from there, he actually went into the food service business. And what's fascinating though is as much as he talked about starting a business, he actually never really did it. Right? It's just kind of a weird thing. I think, people get so secure in their jobs and they have to support their family that making the handoff from a full-time corporate life into running a business and being your own boss and responsible for 100% of the sales and income is a hard handoff, right? But he had a desire always and had the mindset of there's better ways of doing things, always. So I was probably one of the first, along with some of my brothers a little bit later on, to kind of venture out and create, small companies. And some were successful, right? As we would say, successful is like you at least made a little bit of money. That's success, right? And some weren't. But even the ones that were not successful, I would say I learned more from those than the ones that actually were successful. The companies that you start that fail, it's not that you give less energy, it's just that the problem was harder, right? The marketing nut may have been a little bit tougher to crack, or maybe not enough research was done, not for a lack of trying, but maybe for just a lack of direction or experience. So over the course of, many years, we're probably talking 15, 20 years starting small businesses, I learned a lot. And now ventures, as I start thinking about them, I kind of go back and say, okay, what business have I tried like this in the past? What did I learn? Where did I fail? Where was I successful? And then incorporate that into, as best you can, into the next business idea. So yeah, it is part of the DNA, and it really did start at the dinner table. Probably once or twice a week, we would be talking about business ideas. Also, my dad was really open to talking about his job at the dinner table. And I see the dinner table a lot because that is the one key spot where I think, families really gel and they come together. The phones are turned off. The TV is turned off. You're forced to have a conversation, right? And what that does when it gets kind of like, hey, how was your day? Once that is all done, then you start getting into meat. And a lot of times that meat is really like the substance of, your deep learning. And just through osmosis, him talking about working with his people or a business challenge and how they overcame it. And a lot of times, by the way, it was a conversation between him and my mom. I was just like a fly on the wall, right? I'm just eating my vanilla ice cream with 4 or 5 cherries on it, and I'm learning all this stuff. And as I became, a little bit older and was able better to understand the problems that he was talking about, I would start conversing and trying to add value where I could or ask questions. And that base understanding of business in the corporate world, and also, the couple days a week we talk about side stuff, it really just, I think, made me a little bit more well-rounded than an individual who maybe wouldn't have had those conversations. That's all.
Absolutely, dude. I love that you hit on that point, because I think there's so much value in that for the other listeners, for other men that are listening. Like, look, I get it. We're all busy. We're all running around. We're all doing our things. But that moment of taking a time for, even if it's an hour, 30 minutes, to sit collectively as a unit. And like you said, it doesn't even have to be you talking to your children, talking to your partner, whatever, having those conversations. It's impacting, it's showing that there's things going on. And look how much you gained, like you were saying, when you weren't even chiming in. Like, you were still there, you were absorbing, man. And I think we forget that a lot of times, just because our little ones, you're like, they're taking it all in, man.
Oh, that's exactly right. I'll look around the table and no one's listening, right? No one seems like they're doing their own thing and looking around, they're eating their food. It's just me and my wife talking. And then, it comes bedtime and one or two of them will say, hey, you guys were talking about this at dinner. What was that all about? And it just clicks. Like, they're always listening, always.
Always, dude. And watching. It's like, oh,
yeah,
you picked that crap up because that's what I did. I'm sorry about that. That's so good, dude. What other things would you say are some of the big impacts your dad had on just even the way that you're raising your kids now?
I'd say drive and work ethic. And you can take that too far, right? But I think the drive that he had, there were times where I'd have a sleepover, and 6 a.m. on Saturday, he's on the phone with his reps, yelling and screaming, right? Why didn't you get that sale? What's going on? All kinds of stuff. And it really, at the time, I didn't know. I just thought it was really annoying that we couldn't sleep in because we were up until 3 or 4 a.m. anyway. If I didn't realize until later that, he really instilled in me that you got to have a strong work ethic, right? You have to address problems head on. You can't skirt around them because that really just makes them fester and get larger, right? He was really gregarious. He had a certain personality about him that made him kind of a lovable guy. And one thing I noticed too on those conversations is that he can come down on somebody really hard, where it was uncomfortable as a listener for the other person, right? But 5 minutes later, they were laughing and they were joking. And, I don't see that a whole lot in the corporate world that I'm in now, where you can have that kind of balance, right? Where you can get your point across, you can address it, you can be purely candid, but them at such a personal level where the recipient of that understands like, hey, yeah, they're letting me know how it is. And we're going to move on. Message received, we're good, right? And I think that's really important for those of your audience who manage people to truly understand that being candid and being really upfront, you got to do it. But you have to know them at a personal level to where you can kind of offset, right? And they know everything's okay. They're not going to lose their job because of the conversation you just had. So I learned some of those skills. I think obviously the most important one was just really drive and family. He was able to balance family for the most part pretty well with all of that.
Absolutely, dude. So I noticed with you, you have a very similar personality like that. Like you just are one of those guys that walks in, it's super infectious. You can own a room, but at the same time you can sit back and observe and be that kind of guy. Is that, and you were talking about witnessing that kind of with your father as well. Like, is that important for you to instill in your kids now?
It is. Yeah, 100%. I try not to be not myself, because I've noticed sometimes when you are really tired, right? And then you try to be super, hey, how are you? It comes across as inauthentic. Mm-hmm. And the children pick up on that probably more so than most adults. And when you're inauthentic, the conversation, no matter what, is just knocked down a couple levels. And you're not going to have that kind of impact. Whether it's how was your day, it doesn't matter. If it's fake, right? So yeah, I try to emulate, his style when dealing with my kids, because it was a positive impact on me. But I think what I've learned over time is it's okay to be tired. It's okay to be yourself. You have to let your true feelings show and be your true self, right? You have to be. Absolutely. You can't fake that stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that that's so good. And I've heard that from a couple other dads on it as well, talking about that fact, like, look, the kids are going to read through it. Yeah. Like, we can come home and, like you said, we can be exhausted and we come in and like, oh, okay, I'm walking in the door. I got to be pumped up. I got to be dad. I got to be here. And it's like, that they're just reading through all of that. Now,
and you know what? I was going to, sorry to interrupt you, man. I think it's healthy. I think it's really healthy for our children to see that we have some good days and we have some bad days, right? And imagine the alternative where a kid has a parent who's happy all the time and they feel bad one day and they had a bad day. It's a different kind of experience for them. They think that something is maybe wrong because they see maybe someone they look up to never being like that and they're feeling that way, and that can be even worse. So yeah, it's healthy for them to see the good days and the bad days, the really good things and celebrations, and that, oh man, like, I don't know, like we're in a bad spot. It's good for them.
Yeah, I love that. I love being open and honest with them too. And it's not to the point where you got to explain like every situation. Here's where our
right.
Here's all this stuff, right?
Yep.
But being able to be like, look, yeah, we're going through this week's a little tough. There's maybe some emotional things going on, but look, we're all going to get through it. And it's fine, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, hey, kids, let's go grab an ice cream, even though,
right,
like, everything on the opposite end's going in the toilet. So,
Yep.
It's so good, dude. So let's talk about some of the things that you just love to do with your kids, because I know you're extremely busy. You're working like crazy these days, but when you get some downtime or you get that family time, what do you just enjoy doing?
Yeah, I think it's different for every kid, right? One thing I try to do is I try to identify like their passions early, right? And so our middle boy's name is Mikey, and he's into sports, right? So he loves going out and playing baseball and maybe throwing the football around, and that he enjoys that. And when he's enjoying something, I'm enjoying it, right? You love to see your kids in the zone and being happy. My oldest, he's kind of into video games and playing with friends. So, sometimes I'm not a big video game guy, but I'll sit down and we'll play a couple games just so we can connect. And I understand at a deeper level, like what he's doing. And it's actually beneficial later down the road too, when we're just hanging out, like, hey, how you doing on, Roblox or Fortnite? And we can kind of connect at that deep level too. But when we're all together, more recently, I'd love to just play cards. Go fish is kind of our game right now. And it's great because cards are one thing. Our youngest daughter, she's just turning 6. She's starting to understand numbers, right, and colors. And so it's almost like a learning type thing with a little competitive aspect to it, right? And we're all together around the table. We're having fun. They've got like their folders all set up so you can't see the cards. And it just generates an environment for conversation. And it's a lot of fun. We've been doing it for the past month or so. And it's been something that now the kids are, when I walk in, they're like, hey, can we play cards? Can we play Go Fish? And so that's something that's been really fun. We also like to travel. I'll tell you, though, that when we're in the trip, and if you ask me if I enjoy my time traveling with my kids, I'll tell you no. I'll tell you this will be the last trip that we're going to go on for 10 years until they're in college. But, it's one of those things where you ask me a month later, I'm like, we had the best time ever. It was great.
We're so quick to forget, like,
yeah, we really are. And so, in this conversation, it's been a while since, we traveled. Last time was actually go see you. And yeah, I love traveling with family.
That's so good, dude. So playing the cards, because it's just got, you said one word in there, a little competition. Tell me, how important is competition to you, and instilling that also with your family and kids?
I think competition is the basis of like drive, right? It's hard to have drive without competition. Now there's a healthy competition, there's unhealthy competition. I don't like competition within the family where it goes beyond like a card game, right? When it's a card game, it's fine because it's a way for me to identify who's competitive and who's not. And if you are or not, then that's okay, right? But it's also important to instill in the family, and we talk about this all the time, like, hey, we're on the same team, right? Like we can battle a little bit inside, a game of Go Fish or whatever it might be, but we're not competing with brothers or sisters or parents. Like it's the world versus us. Okay. And so we have to be close. We have to get each other's backs. The competition is external, not so much internal. I've had friends and been exposed to, different families where there was a lot of internal competition. And I think there's nothing more kind of divisive to the family structure if somebody doesn't put that to a stop pretty early in the children's development.
Absolutely, dude. Like we'll play games, same thing, card games. My 5-year-old, dude, Lee man is just he's a beast. The kid is already like extremely competitive, and I try to tone mine down when I'm playing, but he'll win a game and he'll like meh, like gets all excited. I'm like smiling. I'm like, good job, buddy. But I'm like, I'm gonna crush you next time, bro. No, just
sit down, double or nothing. Let's go.
Yeah, no, but I love that because I try to do that with them too. I'm like, look, cheer for each other. When one of you guys succeeds, you're both succeeding. Like this is your unit. This is your squad. Like, and to your point, let the exterior, like let everybody on the outside, they're going to come after you anyway. But man, when they come after you, understand that this little guy next to you, your little brother or your older brother, it's got your back 100 and it's going to step up. And that's so important, dude. And I love that you share that message.
If you look at, I think, successful families and families that struggle, that's probably one of the key things, right? Where they feel like they're a unit, that they are together. If somebody's down, you've got, however big the family is, 5, 6, 9 people to pick them up. Where in some of these families that struggle a little bit, if someone's down, it's almost like all right, I'm actually better than that sibling now because they're struggling, and I've taken first place for the time being. And there's less action to kind of extend the hand and be like, let me help you out, right? Or it may be delayed, right? It may take a month, but a month going by when a sibling is in trouble and really down, they're probably in a lot worse spot.
That's right. How do you handle situations like that when you notice your kids are maybe speaking to one another in more of a combatant, like competitive way like that? What do you do? How do you interact with that?
It's a great question. Cody's actually incredible at this, and she'll address it right away. She'll say, "Hey, I love that you guys are competitive, but look, you're brothers, or look, you're brother and sister. Like we treat each other with respect in this house, and leave it at that." And the first time it may fly right over their head, right? But after they've been told that a dozen, kids, 100 times, it sticks. And after enough of that for a number of years, it will become part of their DNA. It's going to absorb into them more often than not. So she does a great job at that. When I get a chance, usually she beats me to it. I'm like, and then she swoops right in and gets me.
You're like, good job. Good job.
Yeah,
I didn't want to go there. Good job.
That's right. Now they love me more.
Yeah. So one big thing, actually, Silvio that was on this last episode,
yeah,
was talking about that fact of how important it is, just being in your relationship with your partner, right? And it just had me thinking about that, like how much when you're interacting with Cody, are you making sure you're also setting a good example? Because they are watching, they are seeing healthy relationships, healthy communication, healthy family dynamics, right? So how important is that to you? Or do you even really think about that? Or are you just engaged in what's going on?
Yeah, so I think we've almost become hyper conscious of that, because I think early on we kind of set some ground rules of how we would and would not act. I guess more what we would not expose the kids to. We realized early on that, it's healthy to expose them to some fighting, right? It's life, it's normal. You don't want to portray like an unrealistic relationship. But to the point where if things got, a certain level of heatedness, that's a word that is now, I guess. We would kind of sideline it, right? We would just kind of cut it off and like, hey, we'll just talk about this later. And we'd move on. And, over the course of 3 years, blending families is not an easy thing. And so there have been some of those conversations that are pretty heated. We'll get to that point where we're like, hey, we're going to table this. But then, we have a relationship where we will talk about it as soon as we possibly can, same day, and then we'll get over it. And the kids will see us, kissing and having fun and laughing together. Pretty soon thereafter, we had a big fight. And it's not on purpose, to be honest with you, but I think looking back on it probably does help the kids understand that it's okay to be able to, feel confident in expressing how you feel with your partner, as long as you find a way to get back to normal, right? And don't let things drag on too long.
Yeah, I think that's a key, right? That's like the healthy relationship, healthy communication.
Yeah.
Like, look, to your point you said earlier, let's address it. Now that's done. Let's get on with it.
That's right.
We don't have
exactly
to
right.
or take anything. It's already laid out. Going on, right?
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about stepping into that role of, melding two families together. Like, how's that been for you as playing this, not only to your kids, but now to your like stepkids, and just playing that role as dad? How's that been?
I think it's actually been a lot easier for me than it's been for Cody, because age has a lot to do with it, right? So when I stepped in, when we got together, her children were pretty young. When we got married, they were calling me dad. I've got a great relationship with her son. We wrestle all the time. That's kind of like his little love language, right? Is like physical touch, messing around. We're just connected. With her daughter, she's got a personality in which she was really open to me, right? And we connected really well, doing different things, just playing dolls and arts and crafts and whatnot. So I think they took to me, and I'm super lucky in the fact that this happened pretty well, right? And again, that's mostly because of age. Because if they look back before me, they probably don't see a whole lot.
Mm.
They're just so young. But on the other side, when you look at Cody, Jason, my oldest, was a little bit older, right? And so Cody didn't get to experience all the cute things that Jason did in the past, and how, he was crawling around, his first steps, his first words, all these things that build up a level of tolerance for parenting and discipline, right? And almost like perspective of why a child is doing something. And so without that, she's really just kind of come in, and he's like a preteen right now, right? And so it's a challenge, I think, for her sometimes to understand why he's doing certain things. And is this a carryover from the previous home life that he had? And how do we, kind of get that out of him as quickly as we can? And so I think that's been an area of conflict between the two, and they both handled it really well, so far. But when you compare us, that's the difference. And again, it's only because of age. It's not parenting style. It's purely because she missed out on the developmental period of his life and all the memories and context that come into what made him who he is today.
Sure, dude. I think that's such a good way of looking at it, man. Like, yeah, it's a great way of actually just like processing that and understanding that there's, when you meld families like that and maybe the kids are older, it's not a matter of them not wanting you in their life as that new parental role, but it's, to your point, the young children, they won't really know a difference.
Yeah.
Where your son, he knows a difference. Doesn't mean that their relationship can't like build and be an amazing relationship. It's just there's just a whole bunch of past that wasn't involved.
That's right.
So with having a preteen like that, dude, what are some of the challenges you feel like you're running into right now? Because it's a different world, brother. I mean, when we
it is
like, we didn't have all the accessibility to all this information and the social and all that. It's a different world, brother.
It is. So one thing I kind of figured out recently is that there's different stages to being like a dad, right? You've got the true parenting, like hard discipline, when the kids are a little bit younger, you're addressing things in a certain way. It's more like, hey, don't do that, right? Yeah. And then as they transition into this other like stage of their life, hormonal, whatever you want to call it, you become more of like a coach, right? So you're parenting, and then although you're in a side avenue of parenting, you're coaching, and things need a little bit more rationale. Telling them not to do something is almost making them do it, right? Saying, hey, you can't go play with your friends after school. They're going to find a way to play with their friends, even if it's for 5 minutes, just because they're like in the rebellious stage. Mm-hmm. And so in this coaching period, it's a lot of that. You got to keep the conversations really short, right? And to the point. And there's got to be maybe some like pros and cons of actions that may come out of a decision that they make, right? So I'll give you an example. So my son is playing with his friend, right? And they run into some high schoolers, and the high schoolers are like messing with them, and the police are called because a neighbor who calls the police apparently all the time sees this interaction, right? And it's kind of like a big deal. And so, we hear that the police are called, and the first instinct is to make a big deal about it, right? That's the first thing you want to do when police are involved, and this is the first time it's ever happened with any of our kids, right? It's a big deal, and you assume the worst. And it's like, hey, what's going on? What happened? You go to your room until we figure this out. And the lesson learned, and that's kind of how we did it. The lesson learned after finding the true story was like, hey, we really should have sat back, truly understood the situation, and then coached and said, hey, was there maybe a different way you could have, gone the route you were going? In the future, Like, how are you going to do this a little bit differently to avoid the situation, right? And I think the message there is truly, finding that way to connect with them, because you can't connect with them like you did before. And you bring in social media and technology. We've had a lot of conversations, Cody and I, about this. What we decided to do kind of early on was we limit the games. Okay. The Xbox is the kind of the system that we use. So they get 2 hours on the weekends per day. And then they have a half day on school on Wednesday. So we offer that to them on Wednesday too. But they got to earn it. All right. So if behavior slips, because it's something that's really important to them, they love doing it. If behavior slips, then we remove game time. And it's a really effective way to kind of discipline, right? But on the other side of technology is like cell phones. And so, Jason, our oldest, just got cell phone service. And we were holding out as long as we could. Trust me, I was reading articles from like Bill Gates, all these people in tech are like, don't do it. Do not do phones. Do not do like social media. It's like the worst thing for them. Like with our kids, we're waiting until they're 18. What we found is that it's not realistic. And there's a balance that you got to strike between them almost being an outcast in their set of friends because everybody else has it. And not like that's a good enough reason to give it to them, but it is somewhat of a social disadvantage, right? And so what we found was, how do we balance giving them access to that kind of service while also maintaining like parental controls, right? And so social media is truly, in our eyes, with their young brains, like a real detriment. So we limit all social media, give them TikTok. TikTok is mostly videos. There's no Instagram. A lot of his friends have Instagram, and some I think have Facebook. But we don't allow any of that kind of interaction because, I think there is truth to the fact that it can kind of hurt you, right? You're all out there for the likes and putting something out there that maybe you aren't, and you're all about the friends and just followers, and that's not the right, at this age, what we want to instill. It should be a lot of face-to-face.
Absolutely.
And so we're really still working now to balance. I mean, he's had a cell phone now for like 2 weeks. So it's been interesting.
Yeah. I think to your point though, man, it's not only rough for like a developing brain, excuse me, but also as adults, a lot of adults can't even process all the interactions. And again, you're doing things that you wouldn't necessarily do just to get some likes, or you start believing that there's certain ways you should treat people or act, or things you have to fulfill you, and none of that aligns with like your core value, or especially as a parent, the things you're trying to teach your kids, and or maybe how you should be parenting.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah. And the only other example I give is just a couple of days ago we started cutting it out after a certain amount of time, right? So 8:30, that's his bedtime. All electronics are shut down. And so what he was doing, and the reason why we went that route is he was, he's got the phone, he's on like the family Spotify, right? He's, maybe watching some Disney movies, whatever. So we cut that off, and then he was listening to his radio at night. And we really, and it was kind of a hard decision, but we're like, hey, is it okay to listen just to the radio at night while you're falling asleep? And we went back and forth, and we thought about like our childhood, and like, there were probably some nights where I was listening to the radio. I mean, is it really going to be that harmful? The solution that we came to was that no, we don't want anything, because we have friends and some family that when they go to sleep at night as adults, they have to have the TV on, right? And that's how they grew up. They have to have, some kind of motion or activity or action to make them feel comfortable and fall asleep at night. Also, we feel like at his age, it's actually probably one of the best times for him to self-reflect. And so he may not get to bed and fall asleep until like 10 o'clock. And if that's the case, he's got an hour and a half to reflect on his day, to let his mind wander, right? In today's day and age, like you said, with technology, you get things instantaneously. You want to know about, when giraffes were first spotted in the wild, like you look it up and in like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And all this kind of information, activity all the time we kind of thought it was healthy to not have anything, just you and yourself, and that's it. And it's been going pretty well. You know, like I said, it's only a couple days old, and you know, it's not easy removing these things either. You know, as a parent, it's really hard to take away things when you know your kid likes them. You know, like Jason loves music, but you got to do what you think is right for them long term as they're adults, because that, you know, as I see it, that's our job, is to prepare them for when they're an adult, and that's it.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that, dude, because, you know, another guest had mentioned that same thing, just said, look, I'm not raising children, I'm raising adults. Like,
That's right.
they're only children for a very small portion of their existence, right? Hopefully. And that's where it's just one of those things that it's like, if we've done our job right, we say maybe when they're 18 like us, they're like, all right, it's time to move on, go to the next chapter, start doing things.
That's right.
Whatever that is or looks like. I love that you said allowing Jason to have the opportunity to just have that inner dialogue. You know, I think we fear that these days.
Yeah.
And not just kids. Like, honestly, I think most people are terrified of not having something stimulate their mind.
Completely agree. 100%.
They're just like, it's like, dude, you're afraid of yourself. Like, what? I mean, yeah, our minds come up with some crazy stuff, but at the same time, it's like, that's not a bad thing either. That's time to reflect, really think, like, do I believe in those things? Challenge yourself, you know? So
you're exactly right. I think a lot of people think of it as unproductive almost, or they're bored. I've been there, right? Hey, if I've got nothing going on, my wife is asleep, do I want to turn on the TV and just throw on like a documentary because I feel like I'm making good use of my time? Like, yeah, I do. But the reality is that, you know, you get probably more out of just the inner dialogue, like you're talking about, self-reflecting. You know, when you have spans of quiet time, and this is good for, you know, as a father, and you just focus on one subject, right? When I'm thinking about my family, I may think about my family in between conference calls. But when you have a long period of time to truly dive into one subject, you end up going like 4 or 5 layers deep. And then you truly find the root cause of maybe why a child is acting one way, or maybe it's a solution, right, that you wouldn't have got to because you wouldn't have been thinking about it continuously. And so with parenting, I mean, you have to have that kind of time to put all your thoughts together, all your observations of your children together into one coherent piece that you can then start to kind of chip away at and understand. A lot of times, I'm totally guilty of this. You know, a lot of times you don't have time to do that.
Dude, the one thing I love, you've actually hit on this twice. That's why I just want to bring it up. You know, you've talked about getting past surface level. I think that that's a lot of not only conversations these days. I think a lot of the content we consume, a lot of our day-to-day activities are surface level, and to be able to dive deeper, especially with the true connection. And as dads, dude, if we have the opportunity, we don't sometimes realize our responsibility and how much is weighed into the fact that if we can get past that, especially with our kids, and build something deeper, like we have the potential to not just change like our children, but like generations to come, dude. And
such a good point. Yeah, so
dude,
I think about so I was gonna kind of build on that, if you don't mind, man. Like I've noticed from when I started working, right, going back 14, 15 years, the kind of interaction I had with my customers and my clients to today, right? They haven't changed a whole lot, but the way in which we communicate has changed. I used to have this sit down lunch. It would take 3 hours, right? Great dialogue and conversation. I mean, now guess what? I've got a 30-minute WebEx invite to cover all the topics, right? And maybe you start off with a, hey, how you doing? Great. How was your weekend? But you don't, to your point, you don't dive deeper. And I think what that creates is over time, you know, as parents, we lose through atrophy just because we don't do it enough, the ability to go lower and to connect at that deeper level, right? I mean, we are experts at surface. We become professionals at the surface level conversations. But once it gets too deep, it's like, whoa, a little antsy here. Are we a little personal here, right? Where in the past it would have been just normal. You're getting to know somebody. That's great. Now, it's just awkward sometimes. And that's a real risk, I think, in this day and age with technology and fast moving and multitasking and, pumping as much in the day as you possibly can. We lose the ability to connect at like that core level.
Dude, man, and just jamming on. I think like you're on to something here though, brother, because I think if we don't do that, I think the risk is not just a little bit of vulnerability that we got to put out to actually be in that moment and present with our kids and dive deep. But the true risk is we do only stay surface level with our kids.
Yeah.
And they will go out and they'll seek out someone that's willing to truly listen and dive deeper.
Yeah.
Eventually.
You're exactly right. Yeah. I mean, could you imagine not knowing who your child is, truly who they are, right? What drives them? And I've had long periods of time, and I'll admit this, that I have been too surface level, just enough to make me feel good, like we've made a connection, and I won't dive deeper. And when I look back on that time span now, I'm like, man, I missed such an opportunity to get to know who my child was. I missed it. It's gone, right? Completely gone, just because I was too busy or I thought I connected and I moved on. And yeah, so I think being present, you kind of hear that a little bit more now. And it's true. Being all in, totally present in the moment. When you're done with work, you're done with work. Right? When you're just with your child, you are just with your child. Your thoughts, all your energy are focused just on those moments, the actions in that split second, 100%.
Dude, that's the greatest gift that we can give anybody or anything we're doing is just our 100% focus, right? And
that's right.
And we're not perfect. We never will be. We won't be able to do that all the time, but even if it's an 80-20 rule, man, it's still, you're still better off than I think most when you take that time. And that's such good advice, brother. Couple of other things, because I want to respect your time, my man. I want to know, is there any moments with like your kids that just like you're having a bad day that you just like reflect back on? Is there any like that moment of time that you're like, man, that makes all this hard work, that makes all this stress, this compounding stress of families and all that just worth it? Was anything stand out in your mind?
Yeah, it's kind of, I got quite a few. Most recently there was a day, and it was just a bad day. Sometimes you got those where, they usually follow a great day, by the way. And, just things weren't going as, I expected. And there were, a lot of events in the day, meetings and whatnot that just didn't turn out as I had planned or as well as I wanted to go. And they were long, and it just took the toll. I came in and I was drained and I was bummed. And so I walk in the door, and our little girl, comes up, and she says, "Daddy, Daddy," and she gives me a big hug. And so I pick her up, and I'm a little bit better, right? Still struggling. And then my two boys round the corner, and they come up and they give me a huge hug. And we sit down on the couch, and I have their full attention, and they're telling me about their day. And it's that they put me in like that cocoon, right? Where all the negative energy or whatnot was just gone, and they insulated me from all of that. And I just in the moment, and it felt absolutely incredible. And it made me think, this is what family is all about. This is it in this moment. And I hope that, when one of my children is struggling, I can create that environment for them. Right, and come in and embrace them and just sit down, and their siblings come over and we're just chatting and picking them up, because they, without even knowing it, right, not even on purpose, they were just, they must have sensed it. I don't know, but they certainly picked me up that day.
Dude, I love that. First, like, thanks for sharing that story, man, because
Yeah,
it's so true. It's fatherhood, parenting, whatever you want to, dadhood, call it.
yeah,
I mean, all of it. It's one of those things that truly has to be experienced to fully understand that. Because I'm with you, brother. No matter how bad the day is, and it's true. It doesn't happen instantaneously. All of a sudden, they come up, tell you like they love you or hug you. You don't just feel instantaneously better, but it's unbelievable when you can stop. To your point, be present, listen, hear them. All
yeah.
some things just like start fading off. It's like, oh,
That's
crappy,
right.
crappy work, like whatever. It doesn't matter. None of that
Yeah, yeah,
anymore because that bubble. It's like that family bubble, man. There's
yeah.
power in it.
There is, and there are a lot of times that, and even in good times, I can look around and I'm really fortunate. I've been able to provide. I feel like I hope my wife would agree. For the family. And when I look around, I think that all of this it means nothing, right? It could all go away, go into foreclosure, take my house, bankruptcy, take my money, repo the cars, right? Just give me the basics for food. But I know with my family around me, like I can rebuild, right? And as long as I've got them, it truly is. It is all that matters. And it sounds like kind of cliche, and but it's the truth, right? And it's in those moments that you actually realize that everything you do is for them. I mean, that's the name of the game. You and I, we go to work for our family, right? That's the output of all those hours worked is to provide, um, and it feels great doing it, right? But the fact that they're there and we are there to bring them up and raise them to be adults, man, there's no better job, no greater responsibility, I would say.
Absolutely, dude. It's so funny. I mean, you and I have chatted about this before. It's like
Yeah.
pre-kids, pre-family, man. I was like, I want Lear jets, I want Lambo,
Yeah,
I want to
you're
be,
right.
but
Yeah.
then now, like, if I had that opportunity, and not to say those things aren't important still, or you can't have goals and set things, but it's like, if I was sitting on that plane and my wife and kids were with me, it really wouldn't mean much.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It'd be a cool experience, for the first
Yeah.
15, 20 minutes. But
Yeah.
then you're missing, right? You're missing part of your like your whole apple. You're
Yeah.
only a slice of it, right?
Yeah, that's it, dude.
Yeah.
That's it, brother. Any advice you have for a parent in your situation that's about to get into a marriage? You have other kids, you have your own kids, and just any advice you'd give them on just how to be a certain kind of dad, or
Yeah.
what do you got?
I'll tell you what. Yeah, I'm glad you asked, man, because the first thing I would say is it's not easy, right? So any expectation you have going into living in a blended family, just get rid of it. Okay, because this is what happens, right? It's very easy to have a super happy, positive relationship when you see maybe their kids once or twice a week, right? It's just easy. But when living under the same roof, there are always things that will develop that will create conflict. And so my advice would be to make sure that you guys are on the same page with disciplinary style, right? What is important to you? What is important to me? How do we figure this out before like we're in action? Because they're going to surface one way or the other, right? You'd rather have them surface in the bedroom or in a coffee shop when you two are just kind of talking through it versus when it's like live and you got a situation you got to think on the fly, right? And that is always really difficult. And you're not going to spot every situation, but if the core values are relatively, they'll never be exact, but if they're relatively similar and the same, you're going to be in a good spot. If you find a point where there is such divergence between what one partner wants and what they value and what the other partner wants and what they value, that gap over time is going to create a lot of conflict. It's just going to get worse, right? The separation will actually end up growing further than getting closer together over time. So Cody and I have spent a lot of time focusing on what our core values are and what is important and what is not important. And sometimes it's just as important to talk about, hey, these are core and these are non-core. We're going to kind of disagree on some of this stuff, but it's okay. Expected, right? As long as we've got this, then we're good to go. So that would be a huge point of advice. The other one I give is you have to set aside time for each other, right? And I think this one's pretty common. I think a lot of people talk about it. Not as many do it. I'm guilty of that. But you have to set aside time, whether it's a little piece of the day, whether it's date night every so often, to really reconnect. Because if you guys aren't connected, then the family is going to have a hard time staying as connected, right? And gelling. Because you guys are the head, you're the leaders, right? You have to have that. So my wife and I, we take about 2 hours every single night, and we're just together. We lock ourselves in the bedroom, right? When all the kids are down, TVs are off for the most part. And, and we just kind of like talk, and we have a great time with each other. We're really lucky like that. But we can never look back and be like, we didn't spend enough time together.
Dude, it's so important. It makes me laugh because, I mean, Katie and I, obviously on a different level than the listeners do, but last night we were sitting there, and it was this damn device was out. We were both on them. We were doing a thing, and Katie stopped. She asked me a question. We were both going, and she made the comment, and it was like, oh man. She's like, I thought that was going to spark a conversation. I was like, like I said, we're not all perfect. We do our things, but it is, to your point though, to be able to take a time out together, to reconnect, to assess your values, because you're both individual human beings coming together to make one thing work. So it's a give and take. Some things are important to you and not to her, and vice versa. But those core things are what really need to stick in order to make that family work. And I think to have that conversation and to be like, it's okay, we might not agree. It might be a hard conversation at times, but we're going to get down to it because our family needs it, our kids need it, and ultimately we as individuals need it too. So I love that, brother. It's great advice.
Can I just add one more? Do I have time?
Yeah, please.
I would say, somebody has to own discipline, right? So a lot of times something will happen and I will discipline, maybe not the same way my wife would. And what happens is that inconsistency and discipline will make the children go to one parent versus the other. And so getting on the same page with what the discipline looks like, who's going to kind of own a lot of that, in this household, it's my wife, because I travel quite a bit and she's a consistent, member who's always here with the kids. But there's been a lot of times where, like my son, right, will come to me and be like, hey, can I do this? And I may actually not know the rules, right? Because we got so many of them, just like all families do. Yeah. I can't remember them all. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. And what that leads to is definitely like parents or the children going to one parent versus the other. And the reality, what I always say now is, hey, yeah, what are the rules on that? And 90% of the time, they're like, no, I shouldn't do it. Then why are you asking me? Right? And if it's like, yeah, we can, I'm like, all right, yeah, go ahead and do it. Or if I'm not sure, I'll say, go ask your mom. But I never try to create, that rift between the two of us, because kids are incredible and masterminds at doing that. They have like that divide and conquer strategy at birth. They do. Absolutely. And so you just got to make sure you guys are united on the disciplines. That's really important.
Well, that's so good, dude. Because they do. They're gonna. I mean, they just have an agenda, and if they feel like there's a crack somewhere in the foundation, they're
diving in,
man. They're manipulating it. So,
yeah.
Well, that's so good, brother. As always, Adam, I love not only connecting, but your advice on this, dude. Like some of the takeaways, the coaching advice that you gave. That's money. The surface level and actually hitting depth. Like there's, oh man, so much in that. Like, gentlemen, if you have a chance, like find out about your kids, like dig deep, like have questions, not just how was your day, but really try to understand, at least if it's only once a week, really how their day went, and get in there with them. And then also what you said there is make sure you take that time with your partner to be on the same level, creating that value so that when you're dealing with your kids, you know, you have a plan, you have a structure, you have a core. And just, yeah, man, this episode, listen to it twice. You're not going to get it all the first time. People listen to it twice. Adam, how can somebody, if they want to reach out and connect with you, what's the best way of doing that, brother?
I'd love to hear from listeners who have more questions. You can reach out to me on my email. And Thomas, I know if we can provide that, somewhere in the video, but it's my first name, which is Adam, dot my last name, Waslefsky. Write it down in syllables, Waslefsky @gmail.com. I'm also on Instagram. But yeah, guys, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to take the time to make sure that you guys on the right track and that we can help each other. I'm sure I can learn from everyone too.
Awesome, brother. I love it. Thank you so much for jumping on with me.
Hey, you take care, bud. Talk to you soon, all right?
All right.